So you just typed those blissful final words on your manuscript, the end. Maybe you just completed NaNoWriMo this year, or maybe you just so happened to complete the first draft of your book at this time. Either way, I want you to take a moment, take a deep breath, and pat yourself on the back. Now, that feeling of accomplishment might be short-lived because this is often the time when anxiety floods in for writers, especially if this is the first book that you have written. What if what you wrote is total garbage? This is where we start to see the self-doubt creeping in. Did you just totally waste hours and hours and hours of your life on something that is never going to see the light of day? You might start to look back through your pages and wonder what the heck you were thinking when you were writing it, and now you just feel at a total loss for what to do with this thing that you have created. Rest assured that all of these feelings are completely normal. And today I want to help you, if you are in this state of flux, figure out what to do with your crappy first draft. Now, as a professional book editor, I actually love crappy first drafts, and I'm often working with writers in the early stages of their manuscript development. I want to give you some tactical tips today that you can apply to your own writing practice. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Every week I post new videos either with insight into a specific writing technique or tactic, or I talk about the publishing industry as my professional background is working in Big 5 publishing. So if any of that interests you, I would love to have you join our amazing community of more than 30,000 writers. Before we get into the tips, it would mean a lot to me if you hit that thumbs up button. It really is such a small thing that helps out my channel in a big way. So thank you so much. The first thing I want you to do once you've finished your crappy first draft is to recognize what you have accomplished. I know this sounds sappy, but it really is critical for you to understand what you have produced and the value in it, because there is so much value there, I promise. First and foremost, remember that completing a draft is a huge accomplishment in and of itself. So many writers say they want to write a book or attempt to write a book and don't ever finish it. You are one of the select few who has. So instead of getting caught up in all of the imperfections of this crappy first draft, take a moment to acknowledge all of your hard work and dedication. I want to tell you a personal story here from working with an author on what she self-proclaimed was a crappy first draft. As a developmental book editor, I often am working with writers through pretty major transformative edits. And when I was working with this particular author, we had worked through multiple drafts of her book such that it was shaped into something almost entirely different than the original draft we worked on. While she felt very proud of where the manuscript ended up, she wished that her first draft was much closer to that product and was a bit frustrated that it took her major transformative edits to get it there. But I reassured her in this process that we were only able to get that final version of the story because of the first draft imperfections and all that she wrote. So I hope that reassures you that even if your first draft feels riddled with errors and there's so much to improve, that your story still is in there somewhere. And this is a necessary phase of the process. It's really not unlike the metaphor of Michelangelo having a slab of marble and having to chip away and find the figure, the sculpture within it. That's really what you're doing with your first draft. It's the raw materials for that final polished story. My next tip for what to do when you have a crappy first draft is to solidify some of the core story elements. As you were drafting and the words were just flowing on the page, you may not have been consciously thinking of elements like genre, length, and POV, and that's totally fine. These things can sometimes bog you down throughout the drafting process, so it's okay that you set them aside for the time being, but now that you have a draft, it's time to start thinking about them more seriously. That's because these major elements of your story are going to inform how you revise and develop it from here. So try to take a look at your manuscript. Do you have a sense of what genre it falls under, or is it merging elements of different genres? Now, think about the length. Is the length pretty much standard for that genre, Or are you really far under or really far over the standard word count range? Also, what about your treatment of POV? Remember that the POV is the way in which the reader experiences the story, and it has a drastic shift on the tone of the novel and how we engage with the story. So you want to be very intentional with this, especially as you go through subsequent drafts. Do you have a consistent POV from the beginning to the end of the novel? Do you incorporate multiple characters' POVs? Maybe are there sections where you're slipping between close third person and omniscient narration? You're going to want to consider and refine these big picture elements as you go through the next stages of your revision process. You might not have solid answers for all of these right now, and that's okay, but at least let these questions begin to percolate and marinate in your mind. Before we get into the next tips, I have a really exciting announcement. If you think you know what I'm going to say, don't hit the skip button. I promise this is entirely new. I've been wanting to create a new series of content for quite a while that really dives more into my actual expertise area of developmental editing. And just this past week, I launched a new series of content on my newsletter where I'm taking a deeper dive into specific editorial issues, walking you through hypothetical examples of how this can manifest in a story, and offering specific takeaways for you to apply to your own work in progress. This is a part of my existing Chapter Break newsletter, so if you're subscribed, you're already going to be able to see a preview of this series. Please do check it out and let me know what you think. I'm trying this out as a premium version of my newsletter, but my interview content, as always, is going to remain totally free. If you haven't yet subscribed yet, you have a free resource waiting for you. It's called my Story Self-Assessment Worksheet. It's a resource I designed specifically to help you take a hard look at your current crappy first draft and see what could be improved to take it to the next level. That's going to automatically opt you into my newsletter, where you can check out all of my free content and preview my premium content. Thank you so much to all of you who have already subscribed to the premium newsletter. I'm so excited about it. And please, please don't be shy in letting me know what you think. This is ultimately for you, and I want to do everything I can to make it valuable. My next tip for what to do after you have a crappy first draft is to understand the levels of editing. It is imperative that you are very intentional and deliberate with your revision process. Otherwise, it is likely going to be overwhelming and you can quickly burn out. I am all about editing as efficiently as possible, which means starting from the thorny, big picture structural issues and then working your way down into sentence level issues like grammar and typos. It doesn't make sense for you to get hung up on all of those small line level issues at this stage and perfect each and every sentence, because remember, those sentences might change between now and the final draft, or be omitted entirely. So you don't want to do double duty with that work. If you're not totally clear on the differences between developmental editing, copy and line editing, and proofreading, that's completely fine. But I recommend taking this time to brush up on those different definitions. And I have another video that goes into what a developmental edit actually is, so definitely check that out. Now, I do recommend that you take a break from your manuscript before diving into any level of editing, because that's really going to help you see your draft from a new perspective. So make sure you take that step first. My next tip for what to do when you have a crappy first draft is to take your time sharing it. A common mistake many authors make once they have a completed first draft is to immediately send it to a loved one, a family member, or a friend to get their thoughts. I totally understand where this inclination comes from. On some level, you might be seeking some kind of validation, especially if you're not feeling great about the draft. You want someone else to tell you that it's awesome, right? But try to resist the urge to immediately share your story with someone else. Because if you share it when you personally are feeling a little bit uncertain and a little bit vulnerable about it, you're really not going to be in the right headspace to receive constructive feedback. And in the worst case, the feedback that you get could end up making you feel worse about your draft. First, I want you to take some time to think about your manuscript and think about your story on your own, and try to identify aspects of it that you want to develop. What experience you want this story to deliver to the reader. You want to have a more solid sense of what your real intentions are with this book before sharing it with someone else. Also, be really cautious with who you share your manuscript with. Ideally, it is someone who's going to give you honest feedback and not just tell you it's amazing. Someone who understands what you are trying to accomplish with your book, ideally has knowledge of your genre, and someone who comes from an editorial background or has the ability to provide insightful editorial critique. My final tip for what to do when you have a crappy first draft is to not let publishing concerns derail you. Writing the book and then publishing the book are two very different pursuits. And right now, you still need to focus on writing the best possible book. It's really easy to get overwhelmed and stressed when you start digging into your publishing options. And I promise you're going to have a lot of time to think about that when the time comes. But first, you still have a lot of work to do on the manuscript itself. So don't let all of that distract you from what needs to be done. As you are going back in to revise your manuscript, it does help to have some sense of whether you're interested in traditional publishing or self-publishing, because that can inform some editorial decisions that you make. But try not to put the cart too far behind the horse and distract yourself from what actually matters right now, which is creating the strongest possible manuscript. Because no matter which publishing path you ultimately go down, the first step of that is to have a polished draft. One that you feel confident in and one that reflects your vision for the story, so focus on that first. If you were feeling down about your crappy first draft, I hope this video offered you some reassurance and some guidance on what to do next from here. Remember, think of this crappy draft as the raw material from which you are going to create the beautiful finished product. Let me know in the comments if you completed your first draft and when. I would love to hear about it. And if you're looking for some more tips on how to revise and work through the different levels of editing, I have another video that goes into the easiest process for revision. Before you head out, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to join our amazing community if you haven't already, and don't forget to check out my brand new series in my Chapter Break newsletter, or subscribe to get your free story self-assessment if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing.